Seattle teaches you to trust glass. Whole months go by where the sky is a fogged window, and the city behind it is just a suggestion, but the panes always hold. I learned to take comfort in that. You can't see everything, and you don't have to, as long as the frame is true. I build frames for a living incident response. Playbooks, access control trees, boring things with boring names that keep other people's mistakes from becoming headlines. My wife sells houses. She makes strangers feel like their future is already standing in the living room, smiling at them from the couch. We were a good match for a long time. She built dreams. I defended them. The first crack in the glass was a yoga mat. Maya bought it at a boutique on Capitol Hill, one of those places that burns Palo Santo and somehow convinces you that $46 for a rectangle of rubber is a vote for your better self. She left it in the back seat of her car, rolled tight with a leather strap like a gift to a person you haven't met yet. She said she'd started helping at a studio after hours, checking in students, folding blankets, mopping sweat off confidence. "It calms me down," she said, and brushed my shoulder with her fingertips in the doorway the way she does when she wants her sentence to be the end of the conversation. If the mat had stayed a mat, maybe it would have been. But then, there were the charges that didn't belong to a studio, a parking ticket near Fremont at 2:17 a.m. on a Wednesday, when the studio's schedule on their website stopped at 9, a lift to an address on Stone Way that turned out to be a short-term rental building with a water feature and doors that beeped, a Venmo to someone named Cole H with a construction emoji and a grape cluster, accompanied by, "Thanks for the lights." Lights. I pictured string lights, fairy-lit patios, staged evenings. I pictured her smiling at someone who thinks string lights can fix the way a room feels when you move through it. "I thought the studio's in Capitol Hill," I said one morning, very lightly, passing her coffee like there wasn't a question tucked into the handle. "Fremont is cheaper to park," she said. "If I can't find a spot, I hop a Lyft. Don't be the guy who lectures me about rideshare safety. You've already locked down the router like it's Fort Knox." "Fair," I said. "I don't lecture." "You professionally lecture," she said, smiling. "You call it a tabletop exercise." She wasn't wrong. I do run drills that start with fake disasters and end with real improvements. We schedule them. We bring muffins. No one is surprised. Maybe that's why I missed what was right in front of me. She started putting a passcode on her phone after 8 years of automatic trust, and I did not make a drill about it. She started sleeping in shorts and a cami instead of my t-shirts, and I told myself it was just the heat. She started using the word "we" when she meant her brokerage, Rain and Pine, the way people do when the group in question has become the gravity in their day. "We put in the hours," she'd say, "and we can't lose that cellar. And we landed a mid-century in View Ridge, and I'm going to live there in my head until it closes." She is very good at her job, and her job is to make a room love her enough to love itself. The second crack was smaller. I found a key fob in the washing machine, the color of wet pennies, leather loop stamped with CH. It wasn't one of ours. "Oh," she said, "too fast." When I held it up like a coin I'd found in the couch. Contractor left it at the Ballard staging. I was washing the slipcovers. The story made sense because she makes stories make sense for a living. I put it on the counter, and she put it in her tote. And that night, the tote lived in the trunk of her car, with her heels and a half-eaten bag of almonds and the yoga mat for a woman who is always on her way to becoming her best self. You make choices. You can choose to be the man who thumbs through the trunk of his wife's car while she's in the shower. Or you can choose to be the man who sits on the couch and tries to learn the geography of a new silence. I chose, for a while, to be the man who made lists in his head. Dates, times, addresses, words she was starting to use that had a role rather than a person behind them. Investor, contractor, silent partner. In my world, a silent partner is a bug. Her open house calendar bloomed the way Seattle cherry trees do, all at once and then shredded by rain. She had 6 weekends in a row of beautiful strangers walking through other people's lives, 2 Saturdays and 4 Sundays, one in Queen Anne with a view of water and gold, one in Ravenna with a lawn like a promise, one in Rainier Beach that used light to distract you from the train. I started showing up at the tail end, carrying a bakery box and a smile, tall coffee for her, tiny ones for the assistants, and a hand on her shoulder that lasted enough seconds to sound like proof in a room full of clocks. "You don't have to do this," she'd say, grateful and guarded. "You hate being on display." "I hate bad staging," I said. "And I like watching you work." Which was true. Maya at an open house is what I assume a really good sailor looks like on a choppy day, loose-hipped, open, hand on the tiller like she was born with it. She pays attention to the person who seems least likely to make an offer, and somehow those people end up staying long enough to surprise themselves. If she were a con artist, she'd be the best one in the state. She's not. She just made a mistake about what the job of her attention is. By the time the 3rd crack showed, I had a plan. Plans are what I do when I don't like the odds. I do not confront. I do not slam doors. I do not demand phones. I build a narrative the way I build an incident timeline. Careful, annotated, not for show. I started with open sources because if there's a way to do a thing that doesn't make you hate who you are a week later, that's the way you want. Seattle makes it weirdly easy to know where someone's been if the someone in question does city things. Metered parking, transit, late-night ramen, impulse purchases that post to a bank server with the precision of a confession. You can request your own data from rideshare apps. You can look up parking tickets by plate on the municipal portal. You can see when a public transit card taps in. None of it is illegal. All of it is extremely informative. I requested Maya's rideshare history because her account shares a card with our household Apple ID. She'd done the same for me years ago when we got married. A practical thing so the receipts in Mint didn't look like 2 strangers dating too many people. I asked her for nothing. I waited. The zip file arrived, and I opened it like a surgeon opens an envelope. It didn't tell me a story. It gave me coordinates and time. Wednesday, 11,051 p.m., pickup, our house in Green Lake. Drop-off, Stone Way. Wednesday, 2,036 a.m., pickup, Stone Way. Drop-off, a block from our house, not our house. She walked the rest of the way for reasons that made sense only to a person who knows every squeak in a floorboard. I checked the studio schedule for the yoga boutique that got most of her new money. The last class on Wednesdays ended at 9. I called myself a jealous creep, and then I made a column in a spreadsheet labeled Wellness. I put the class times in it like I was trying to convince myself of something softer than the truth. The Airbnb connection came by accident, like good OSINT often does. I was looking at the Stoneway address because I am thorough, and because apartment buildings like to brag about their amenities like a teenager with a new haircut. The building's website showed a lobby with a fake fireplace and a door with a smart lock. A quick search led to a dozen short-term rental listings in the same building, because of course it did, because Seattle is 2 kinds of city at once, and one of them is a hotel with a conscience. One listing, a floor plan that matched the drop-off GPS dots in Maya's rideshare history, had a bright red note about recent package thefts. The host had added a line, almost as a threat, that the property had an exterior doorbell camera that pings upon motion with a timestamp. I stared at the sentence for a long time. Then I made a booking for a random Tuesday 3 weeks out and sent a message to the host asking if they could confirm that the camera had been working on a specific night last month because my friend had been nervous walking home and I wanted to check the time we left. The host cheerfully replied with a cropped screenshot from their camera log showing motion events at the door around 2:15, 2:19, and 2:37 a.m., with dates that made my chest do the opposite of expand. No faces, no names. Just motion near a door at a time nobody should have good reasons for. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at a cropped image of a green timestamp in a black box, and I felt my marriage exhale a truth I didn't want. "You can stop any time," said a voice I have learned to respect. "You can decide that knowing more will not create forgiveness or even closure. You can decide to act now with what you have and let the rest of your life happen in a different room." I did not stop. I added a log entry to the timeline for Airbnb exterior camera pings, and then I did a thing that made me feel like the worst version of the man I am. I searched our city court portal for parking citations by make and partial plate. It's public if you know what you're doing. The Yoga Boutique's block is full of meters, so is Fremont. 2 citations for an F-150 registered to Cole Hartman, caught after midnight in front of a ramen place, 2 doors down from the building with the smart lock. The charges in Venmo that Maya sent with grape emojis clicked into place. The man with the leather key fob was a contractor who became an investor who became late-night errands. I told myself I wasn't snooping because I was never in her phone. Then I closed the laptop and put my face in my hands and didn't think for a while. The next Saturday, she had an open house in Ravenna, a 1928 Craftsman with a porch that dared you to care about winters, 2 bedrooms, and a small room off the back that had been converted into an office with a staged desk and a fake stack of fashionable books. Ravenna is one of those neighborhoods where it still smells like wet earth because the city can't pave over everything. Buyers show up with strollers and hopes organized by school district. Maya had asked me offhand if I could help with the little projector thing because the sellers wanted a loop of their favorite family photos to play in the office like a memory wall. "You're better with that stuff," she said. "I always mess up the aspect ratios." "I can build you a loop," I said, "because of course I can, because failure of competence is not how I wanted this to end. We can put in the comps too, if you want. Quick slides with recent sales on nearby streets. Buyers eat that for lunch." She kissed my cheek absent-mindedly while answering a text from her boss. "You're an angel," she said. "Be there at 11?" I was there at 10:30. I brought coffee and an HDMI cable of my own because the one in her bag would inevitably be frayed like a sailor's rope. The sellers had already moved out, which is the way professionals like to sell houses. Empty rooms don't argue with your story about your future. A stager had installed a dining table that could never seat anybody comfortably and a couch that knows it will never be sat on. Maya was in the kitchen in a cream sweater that made her look like she'd been poured into the morning. She smiled when she saw me in a way that made me hate and love myself at the same time. "Office, down the hall," she said. "Projectors on the shelf, you're the best." I plugged things in. I made the loop. Family photos, yes. Comps, yes. 3 seconds each with address, list price, sold price, days on market, neighborhood map, buy your brain candy. Room measurements, yes. A slide that said, "Welcome. Please remove shoes or use booties. Thank you for people who will never read a sign placed directly in their line of sight." And, in the middle of the loop, a 40-second timeline with no names and no accusations, just facts with the serial numbers filed down to remove the faces. It went like this. Wednesday, 9:00 p.m. Yoga studio, last class, ends. Wednesday, 11,005 U1 p.m. Rideshare pickup, Green Lake. Wednesday, 12,001 T a.m. Drop off, Stoneway End. Short-term rental building, map. Wednesday, 2017 a.m. Parking citation issued to vehicle registered to CH near N36th St. Here. Wednesday, 2036 a.m. Rideshare pickup, Stoneway N. Wednesday, 2042 a.m. Drop-off, 1 block from Green Lake address. Wednesday, 2:15, 2037 a.m. Exterior door camera motion events recorded at short-term rental address. Host log. The slides were white text on muted gray, the way property slides are. There was a tiny sample timeline and a footnote about public sources. It could have been anyone's life. It was not anyone's life. It was mine, refracted through the habits of the person who used to come home to me and then stopped. I watched it run. The loop took 8 minutes. The timeline didn't look like Scandal, unless your body already knew where the bodies were buried. It looked like data. I let it be. By 11:30, the house was full of shoelaces and quiet hunger. Open houses are funny because they're part party, part test, part confession booth. People see a story and try to find themselves in it. Maya greeted them, charming and measured, and when she turned to point out the original built-ins, she could have been a conductor. She introduced me as my husband, Ethan. He's making sure the tech doesn't crash on us, and the word husband landed in my stomach like a bolt I hadn't tightened. He came in 20 minutes later, the man with the contractor's tan and the "this will all work out" jawline that American optimism gives to the people who don't need it. He wore boots you wear when you think your boots should say something about you. He had the leather fob I dried on our counter in his pocket. He was with a buyer, a man in a Patagonia vest who introduced him as our investor, which is how a Sin enters the room with a handshake. He didn't see me at first. He saw Maya. The way he didn't touch her is how I knew everything. In the office, the projector looped. Comps, measurements. That pointless, please remove shoes, slide that pleased me stupidly because people looked at it and then took off their shoes like spellbound toddlers. Then the timeline. It ran as buyers took photos of the built-ins and discussed whether their sectional would fit in a room it would definitely smother. It ran while a woman in a raincoat asked Maya if the neighborhood had a good block party because her wife likes to bake. It ran while Cole, of course his name was Cole, it had to be, adjusted his watch without looking at it, and his buyer asked if teardown down the block meant noise or opportunity. It ran while I stood in the doorway of a room staged to look like work and felt the thrum of a server room in my own ribs. Maya saw it. She didn't react. If you want to understand why she closes, watch how she manages micro moments, beautiful indifference, then a pivot that steals attention back from the wrong corner. She moved to the projector cart like a hostess moving to fluff a flower, clicked backward to comps, and smiled as if the glitch had been the white noise of polite society. "It's a sample," she said to me under her breath between buyers. Voice professional, face professional, only the throat telling the truth. "Make it go away." "It will loop," I said. "It's part of the market data. People can pause it if they want." "You're doing a thing," she said. "Don't do a thing." I didn't answer. I answered a different way, to a couple in their 30s who wanted to know what the roof was like. "Architectural shingles," I said cheerfully, like a man who has never weaponized a PowerPoint in his life. "Installed in 2017. 2 more good storms in them, maybe 3. A broker I recognized from another brokerage came by, eyes sharp the way a kestrel's are. "Is that a market cadence slide?" he asked, watching the timeline as if much depended on whether the italics made sense. "That's clever. Public sources, huh? I should do one that shows how many offers in a given week are all cash versus contingent." "It's a work in progress," I said. "I'm experimenting with layout." Maya moved through the house, graceful and exact, and I loved her fiercely in a way that made me a bad person to my own cause. She made the house feel like it deserved attention. People said they could see themselves here, and I believed them. At 1:30, the open house was at its thickest. Neighbors came to snoop, shy husbands to say yes with their eyes, a kid to ask if the backyard was friendly to trampolines. Cole drifted into the office, likely on purpose, likely to perform the casual interest of a man who wants to be taken seriously by other men who think money has a smell. He saw the timeline, and his face did something I will keep in a jar in my head forever. Courage first, then doubt, then entitlement, then a tiny strain of calculation as he scanned for the trapdoor he must have assumed was in every floor he stood on. He looked at me. I looked back. We were two animals at a watering hole pretending we drink for the same reasons. "That's an odd slide," he said. "The way men say odd when they want to say dangerous, but their pride is in the way." "Market cadence," I said. "Late nights, early mornings, transit patterns, parking enforcement clusters, short-term rental occupancy. People like to know what the rhythm is before they move to a new neighborhood." "Useful," he said, "if you like reading tea leaves." "I don't read tea leaves," I said. "I read time." His jaw slacked and set. He looked at Maya, lifting his chin a millimeter like a man tapping glass under a table. She didn't look at him. She pointed out the built-ins to a kindergarten teacher with ink on her fingers. Her professionalism was an island, and I was the water deciding what shape to be. I went with her professionalism because that is who I am. I refuse to set the room on fire until the exits are marked. I let it loop 3 more times. People noticed, in their peripheral vision, the way you notice the weather is about to change. You could feel the house lean a degree into honesty. It is a wild thing to watch. A group of polite adults align their understanding silently, without a word spoken, simply because data asked them to. I've seen it in war rooms. Watching it in a living room made my hands cold. When the crowd thinned, I clicked the projector to black. Maya and I stood in the doorway, the last buyers lingering in the yard. Cole was in the dining room with his Patagonia buyer, pointing at the molding like he had a meaningful relationship with it. "You just made me into a theme," she said softly. "Was that the point?" "The point," I said, "was for the room to hold the truth once, so I didn't have to hold it alone." I kept my voice low and apologetic because anger is not a language I speak fluently enough to be persuasive. We can talk at home, if there's something to talk about. "Don't do this," she said, and there was a tremor in it for the first time. "Not here. Not with them." "I didn't give names," I said. "I gave the world the only kind of story that people believe. A timestamp and a map dot and a parking ticket signed by a person who doesn't know me." "This is cruelty," she said, so softly that only the doorframe heard it. "It's decency for future me," I said. "It's me refusing to spend the next 6 months letting you define what counts as a misunderstanding." The last neighbor left. Maya checked the sign-in sheet, eyes moving, brain counting, professional reflexes doing CPR on a day that had bitten her. Cole's buyer left him near the door with something like a frown. The investor lingered, admiration drained from his face like blood. He walked into the office and shut the door behind him, as if he had ever been owed privacy in a house that wasn't his. "You don't get to do that," he said. "You don't get to take your marriage and turn it into a parlor trick." "Which part did you object to?" I asked. "The Wednesday night when you were a midnight philanthropist? Or the early morning when my wife remembered where we keep our slippers?" He moved toward me and stopped when he saw my expression. I'm a man who stays very still when drunk people start to dance too close to the fire pit. I have that look in my pocket, and I took it out now. "Back up," he said to himself more than me, and obeyed. Maya stepped in between us like a stage manager moving furniture off a set no one should have built. "Stop," she said. "Cole, go. Ethan, close the house and go home. We'll talk where our wedding photos can see us." "I want the fob," I said to Cole. "The one you left at my house with your initials on it. I want you to stop coming to my block. I want you to email Rain and Pine Compliance and tell them that every key you've touched on this listing was for professional reasons only. And then I want you to never touch one again." He had planned a dozen speeches for the day his wife found out. He had planned a dozen for the day a husband found out and confronted him at a bar. He had never planned one for a day when a man with a laptop made a slideshow that removed every escape route except the one marked, "Tell the truth softly and leave." He stared at the black screen where the projector had been useful and then not. as if it owed him a version of itself that would put him back into a place where the rules were his to pick. He said nothing. He looked toward the door. I opened it for him. It is a small pleasure to open a door for a man who has been opening doors he didn't pay for. He left without finishing the turn of his head to look at me. Maya and I cleaned up as if we were normal. You can learn a lot about a marriage by how two people stack booties in a plastic tub after strangers leave. She folded the sign and put it in her tote. I wound the cable. The house stopped performing and returned to being a box where choices live. "When did you decide to do that?" she said finally, not moving, not looking at me. "The night I found the Airbnb camera log," I said. "I booked a Tuesday in case we needed to sleep somewhere other than our bed." Her face changed. I've seen her cry over a child's drawing left in a house because what's more honest than a scribble that loves you? I've seen her cry when a buyer backed out because a cousin told them the school wasn't good enough for their unborn kid. She did not cry now. She made a sound like an apology with no words in it, and then she said, "I'm sorry," in a voice that sounded like somebody else's careful handwriting. "For what?" I said. "For wanting another self? For thinking you could be two people at once, and the extra one would live in a room where the lights didn't cost anything?" "For lying like it was housekeeping," she said. "For telling myself I was holding it together with tape when I was actually pouring sugar into the tank. I thought," she stopped to breathe, a bent, patient breath. "I thought I could flirt with the version of my life where everything is easy and not pay any bill for that. I thought the math wouldn't notice." We did not talk about forgiveness. It's a word you bring into a room after you've cleaned everything else out. We talked about logistics because logistics are what you do when your heart is a shivering animal. She would stay with her friend Nadia for a week. I would keep the house and the dog we did not have yet. We would tell her boss that we were taking a pause, and she would tell the truth if asked. I packed a bag for her while she watched. The weird intimacy of folding a person's t-shirts into a space that won't be yours anymore. She put her wedding ring in her wallet, which looked like a compliment and felt like a boundary drawn with a pencil. Rain and Pine called me Monday morning on a number I hadn't given them. "This is purely procedural," the woman said, voice calm, trained. "We received the report of a potential vendor boundary breach at an open house. We want to make sure our staff feel supported and safe, and that our clients' properties remain unentangled from personal matters. Do you have time for a conversation?" "I do," I said, "because I like policy almost as much as I like oxygen." I told them there had been no threats, no shouting, no trespass beyond the soft trespass of an investor staying in a room too long. I told them my wife hadn't asked for help because her pride is the most expensive thing she owns. I told them I prefer my name not be in any email that wasn't required by statute. They thanked me and were deferential to the man whose timeline had become the room's backbone. The next day, Maya told me she had a meeting with compliance, and then a smaller one with HR, and then an email from her broker that used the phrase reassignment of active listings and professional boundaries and time to reflect. She said it like she was reading the menu at a restaurant she could no longer afford. She didn't argue. She didn't defend. She said, "I am going to tell them I cross lines." And I believed her because the woman I fell in love with believes in rules even when her loneliness doesn't. The investor's fallout was quieter and uglier because quietly ugly is how men like him know they're still in the club. He called a week later to ask me not to make this a thing online. I told him the only thing I liked online was multi-factor authentication. He told me he would make it right, as if this were a billing issue. I told him I wasn't his accountant. He asked if I'd at least keep buyers out of this. I told him buyers watch, no matter what you think, and they know what to do with what they see. He stopped calling. His wife emailed mine a month later and wrote a letter to the brokerage copied to 3 partners that used words like reputational risk, and vendor vetting, and after-hours access. I did not feel victory. I felt like someone had turned the heat off. Maya moved out of our house and into an apartment near Green Lake, where the light forgives you, even when the lake won't. She started working with first-time buyers again because they're less interested in glamour and more interested in whether the outlets are grounded. She stopped saying we about her brokerage. She stopped saying yoga. She started saying Nadia a lot because a friend's name is a raft when you don't trust your legs. We met with a mediator in a room with a ficus and a sound machine pretending we were near water, and we divided our life without pretending we could divide our history. She kept the blue Dutch oven. I kept the concert poster. The ring, which had lived in a wallet, came home in a box like a mistake that deserved its own address. Then, like Seattle does, the city kept raining and also didn't. The light did that thing where it feels like a rumor. I adopted a dog because the house needed someone to bark at the mail, and I needed something living that was incapable of lying to me, except about whether it had eaten a sock. I named him Nash because I like names that sound like steady boats. He learned the perimeter faster than I taught him. He learned not to flinch when a delivery truck idled. A month after the open house, I walked past the Ravenna Craftsman on a Sunday out of habit. A young couple was carrying in a rolled rug, the kind you pretend is antique long enough for it to learn how to be. A kid pushed a box that said toys in marker into the doorway with the solemnity of a priest. Through the front window, the office where I had put a projector looked like an office that would be used for actual work, stacks of bills, a plant that would struggle, a coffee ring no one would see until it spread. The house didn't remember me. It didn't remember us. That felt both wrong and right. Sometimes I write code for myself the way other people write prayers. Here's one I wrote and taped under the Wi-Fi router because I'm annoying and because I needed it near something that keeps my world talking to itself. Be the floor, not the fire. The floor holds everyone up, even when they're making mistakes. The fire is exciting and bright and people tell stories about it, but it can't be trusted alone. It always gets out. I wanted to be the floor for myself the day I put 40 seconds of truth into a loop and asked a room to carry it with me. I did not want to be the fire. The fire burns you too. If you're listening to this and waiting for the part where I say we got back together after therapy with vows that shine like countertops, I don't have it to give you. We didn't. I don't know if we will. We talk sometimes. We're civil in a way that makes waiters proud of us. She sends videos of the houses she thinks I'd like pretending it's because I like mid-century trim. I send photos of the dog pretending it's because he did something objectively cute, and not because I can't imagine sending her nothing anymore. We are planning to sell our house in the fall because a frozen thing is not the same as a safe thing, and we both want a room that doesn't look at us like a witness. We will each leave with less than we came with, and maybe that is the cost of a story that ends before it decides to rot. What did I learn? Professional me, the one who black boxes disasters and writes postmortems that comfort shareholders. That the only way to put a price on honesty is to pay it. That there is no ethical way to make a private harm public, except to make yourself public too. That if you're going to reveal something at an open house with a projector, you need to be ready to stand there afterward and carry chairs, and apologize to the house, and stack booties, and make small talk with a man who will never know he almost bought your kitchen just to get your attention. A friend asked if the projector plan was petty. I told him it was precise. He asked if I did it to humiliate her. I told him humiliation is what you feel when your story loses the argument with the facts. I didn't write the argument, I just typed it on a slide. He asked if I regret it. I told him I regret the entire year that made it necessary. I told him I also slept after, which I hadn't done in weeks. If you've stood in a doorway and watched the person you love move through a room like the only person in it who doesn't know she's on stage, if you've kept your hands in your pockets while your heart rearranged the furniture, if you've ever built yourself a handrail out of data because you can't stomach a speech, Then you already know what I'm going to ask. Would you have done it in public like I did? Or would you have kept it private and begged the truth to meet you where you live? Tell me in the comments because I'm trying to figure out if decency is a room with more than one door. And if this story kept you listening, hit like so. It finds the next person staring at a rideshare receipt at 2,000, and wondering whether the glass can hold. Subscribe if you want more and share it with someone who thinks a 40-second timeline can't change a life.